And you're welcome back as we continue our special live coverage of Ghana's 2024 general elections. It's a pivotal moment for this West African nation as citizens head to the polls amid rising poverty, a high cost of living, and the lingering effects of an economic crisis that has grappled the nation since 2022. Now, the stakes are high and the economy has emerged as the defining issue in this election, from inflation and debt restructuring to youth unemployment and poverty. Now, voters are looking for leadership that can steer Ghana towards recovery and sustainable growth.
Judith got out the glasses. That means we mean business this hour.
I read it, Joe.
In any case, today we'll take a closer look at how the economy challenges of the past few years have shaped voters' choices and also the potential implication for Ghana's future. So this hour, joining us for this to discuss, we'll be having two guests, but first we're going to be starting with our very first guest who has joined us via video chat. Joining us is Etse Sikanku, Associate Professor at the University of Media Arts and also Communications in Ghana. Thank you for joining us, Etse. Good to have you here.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you for coming on, Etse. I mean, let's get started and just talk about the political landscape in Ghana and how it is marked. It's been marked with, one would say, fiscal indiscipline, right? Particularly around election years. As voters head to the polls today, how do you think this the history of economic mismanagement would affect the ballot paper and their choices in this election?
Thank you very much. If I got you right, I got the part about economic mismanagement or something like that.
Fiscal indiscipline. There we go.
Oh, I get what you mean.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Definitely the economy is a major issue that is at play in this particular election. Many people have talked about the difficulties that they are facing. They've talked about their standard of living. They have talked about their purchasing power and how that really has been difficult over time. And the government has taken the blame for it. Including what you've mentioned in terms of spending, in terms of the fiscal environment and infrastructure. And the government has come in for the blame as far as that is concerned. So I do think that on that particular indicator, the government wouldn't score a huge win over there. But of course, the government has also come out to talk about what has led to this. They've talked about the pandemic, the crisis, the war in Ukraine, and the import or the trade infrastructure that had existed at the time. But then at the same time, you've seen the presidential candidate himself admitting from time to time that, yes, he does recognize those difficulties. And so I think on this issue, yes, the incumbent does take the blame for it, and it will definitely feature in a very big way in the election.
Now, I'd say the opposition are, well, they're talking a big game. In their manifesto, they talked about, well, plenty of spendings when it comes to specific areas. However, if you put this on the backdrop of what the incumbent has done when it comes to making sure that their footprints are everywhere, especially in education, for instance, where they have the free education for secondary school pupils, and this has been on for a while, which has led up to the elections, you can imagine that this will inform the voters in a specific kind of way to their advantage. So when it comes to the opposition, these numbers that they have in their manifesto, do you think that these are proper numbers? Do you think that it's going to serve certain purposes, like, for instance, education? And how well will that compare to the past if they win administrations?
All right. So, and just to confirm, you're talking about the opposition party, right?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Yeah. So education definitely has come up very strongly as a major issue in this election, and it has been centered on one thing and one thing. Well, not just one thing, but the major thing that it has been centered on has been free secondary education. This has been, if there was just one thing that characterized or that symbolized or that was emblematic and a sort of insignia of the Akufo-Addo administration, it has been free SHS. It's been one of the most debated and most talked about things. When I say free SHS, I mean free senior high school. And so the opposition's position on this has been that it was implemented in a rush, that it hasn't been implemented in the right way, that there are so many problems and challenges that the policy implementation has faced, and that really it has been a bad policy in terms of its implementation. The government, of course, doesn't think the same. But yes, you are right to the extent that this has never been done before in the country, in the history of Ghana, providing literally free senior high school education to anybody of school-going age around that time to the students. It's quite an unprecedented and audacious policy, and it's really has been a major issue that has characterized the past 8 years. And so you would imagine that the opposition will definitely make hay on it. But they've promised that they will maintain the policy. They said they won't cancel it. They've promised that they will maintain the policy. It's just that they will do a review of it. But skeptics have also said that what does the review actually mean? To what extent are they going to review it? And that is the extent to which education has played a major role in this particular election.
So now let's come to your field now. Let's talk media. Let's talk the role of media in these elections, this election. This will be the first time that social media has played a big part when it comes to campaigning by either parties, whether opposition or incumbent. If that was a competition, who would you say actually took the cake home? Would it be the, what's it called again, the incumbent or the opposition party? Would it be Mahatma or would it be Dr. Bawumia rather?
Right. If you go on social media and research, we all have to be a bit measured in terms of the correlation between social media and electoral outcomes, or the extent of the role of social media in terms of its social scientific effects in elections. But of course, it does play a major role. I'm not going to sit here and discount it. It does play a major role. A lot of research has been done to the functionality of social media in society in various fields, but particularly, especially during elections. They found to be a great mobilizing force, a great sense of affirmation or in advocacy and other things. So yes, that's important. If you look at the numbers, just a few days ago, you'd realize that John Dramani Mahama has, I do think more, not that I do think, he does have more followers than Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. I think former President John Mahama was hovering around 1.5 million followers, and the incumbent Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, has about 1 million followers. But when you look at the research conducted by other or at least one civil society organization who has done sentimental analysis on Facebook, he puts Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia ahead of John Mahama. Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, who is the incumbent vice president and a former central bank deputy governor, is at, I believe, 51.2 or around 51%, and then Mr. John Mahama was in, I think, 48 or 49. So social media sentiments, right, in terms of what people think about them, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, the incumbent vice president, is ahead. But in terms of the engagement and the followership, I think the stats show Mr. Mahama ahead. So give and take, we'll just have to wait and see how this translates into the election. But make no mistake, many Ghanaians are on Facebook, are on X, they are on Instagram, expressing their views, expressing their feelings and their sentiments about the election. There's a huge social media community that has been involved in this election. And the parties themselves have had a huge presence on social media itself. So definitely social media has come to stay and continues to play a major role in this election.
Has celebrities also endorsed the popular candidate? What about the entertainment scene as well? The entertainment industry. Now we know Ghana is very booming with its Gollywood, as well as the music scene and social media influencers. As we're talking about social media, has public figures, whether they're celebrities or movie stars or social media influencers, endorsed the candidate? And do you see that popularity contest, so to speak, play out in this election cycle?
Yeah, it's a very relevant issue to talk about. popular culture has come to stay or has been mainstreamed in politics. So, gone are the days when politics was just seen as a really a serious business, and you don't really see the intersection. But over time, as democracy becomes entrenched, as people begin to understand it, as it begins to expand and infiltrate into the society and it's accepted, there are different innovations and initiatives that people come at this game with. And yes, the popular culture environment, the entertainment, the music and film have featured in a major way. And I'm happy you touched on this because, one of the major things that you began to see in elections here is how deeply involved. I mean, it's happened over the previous election cycles, but it's even more entrenched now. I mean, many musicians have now come out boldly. In the past, they wouldn't really come out to show their face. But one of the major features of this election is how people in the entertainment business or in the popular culture industry have come out, to make their stand, so to speak, in this election. So in the very, very last rally, the very big, final, important rally by both political parties, you found out that there were major musicians who appeared on stage, in both camps. Yeah, who previously we really didn't. And they came there, they sang their songs, they did their performances. And even before that, you were very popular hip life and gospel musicians. For instance, in the last MPP event, Tego Sisters, who are pretty much a symbol of gospel music in Ghana because they did all the way back to the 1990s, came and performed. And same for a similar thing can be said for the NDC. And throughout the election, many dancers, musicians, artists, film stars have featured to galvanize people. In fact, one of the contesting MPs for Ayawaso West Wogon in Accra, which is the University of Ghana enclave, is John Dumelo, who you may know, a very popular film star in Ghana, and he's contesting. And whilst this has happened in the past or has happened in other democracies, I think it's picked up really strongly this time around. And it just showed that politics and popular culture can, after all, be bedfellows. But the good thing about it is that it gets the everyday person involved, people who would ordinarily not pay attention to politics because their favorite musician is performing. They pay attention. The lyrics of the songs are used as advocacy instruments to advocate for certain social things. And so I think it's a very interesting dynamic that we are beginning to see.
Interesting times indeed.
While all this is happening, with the effect of social media, the musicians, the famous stars and all of that, how is the electorate managing misinformation or disinformation, especially when it comes to the very analytical voters, the middle class people? How are these pieces of information that are coming out about the different candidates affecting their preference, let's put it so, and what class of people? Let's take a look at that when it comes to the class of people. Those in rural areas, those in urban areas, those educated, those not educated. How might these informations interact with their decision?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I mean, it's the misinformation age, it's the fake news age. I mean, so we can't really do away with it. Unfortunately, it's become part of the political system over here. Much has been said about it. There's been a lot of efforts to educate people on being politically literate as well as media literate, and to reduce the scourge of misinformation. But hey, it's here. It's been part of it, and it's been done willy-nilly by both parties, both major parties and other even smaller parties. I mean, there's hardly a week that passes by that you don't see information that's come back to be labeled fake. And in fact, there was actually one arrest by of a presenter who had actually gone on radio to say that there are different days for voting for the different political parties, and so if you belong to this party, come on this day. If you just to cause apathy and disaffection. And like you said, this may have different influences based on the demographic groups. So such an information may have a heavier effect in the rural areas, in the less literate areas, who depend heavily on the local radio stations for information. And they literally take everything they hear on these stations as the truth. And so that's could really cause a whole lot of confusion or fear and panic in the environment. When you come to the urban areas, people who are more literate, I mean, it's more sophisticated. People use Photoshop, they use other deepfake, they use other materials and to perpetuate deepfake. They use AI-generated content to really pass on information that if you're not really careful, you may think it's the truth. But many civil society organizations have done a yeoman's job in making sure that they track this. There are a lot of organizations who have been tracking it, who every month come out to issue disclaimers and talk about, I think they even rank the information, they fact check the politicians, both on Facebook, on radio, TV, everywhere. They release reports, and all these are propagated on Facebook and social media as well, so people get to know what's fake and what's real. But you never know what might fall through the cracks. And it's important to pay attention to it even on this day of voting, because any misinformation, any disinformation, any sort of fake news that's passed around could end up causing panic, fear, and undermine the system. So hopefully, as you move forward, there will be more political education and media education on some of these things. But it has happened. I think I'm even doing some research with some of my colleagues on the extent of Facebook. The extent of misinformation and disinformation that was present in this election. I'm not done with it though, but there's been a lot of it all around religion, around gender, around ethnicity. I mean, that there's violence here and all of that. It's touched on very, very different things that are just not true. So yeah, that's what we have to live with, and hopefully more effort will be done to make sure it's reduced.
You've heard, I'm sure you've pretty much had our conversations with our correspondent there from Patasi. And very interesting, he talked about, not really much concerns for violence on, very high tension situation. Everyone's going about their daily duties, daily lives. Business is still as usual, and people are still coming out to vote. Let's talk about that, right? But also the rhetoric of, the do or die affair with, the boat incumbent. Sorry, the boat. It's looking like a two-man horse race.
They've
been there. They're still there.
They know what it takes.
They see what it is. With the people still going about their duties, with the do or die affair, very pivotal moment in this election. What do you think Ghanaians want to see come out at the end of today?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, your reporter did a good job there. And I'll say one or two things. This is Africa, and we are building governance and democracy on the continent. Nigeria had the elections, Botswana had theirs, Kenya had theirs. This is Ghana. There's a story of democratic enhancement and entrenchment which is being written across the continent and which is not characterized by the frames or themes of doom and gloom and conflict. I think that the narrative coming out of Africa, reported by Africans, captures the reality on the ground, as opposed to the snippets and the little limited frames and labels or frameworks that other kind of Western media, some Western media, would want to place an African election. And so when you read that kind of reportage, it gives you a very limited appreciation of governance on the continent. Of course, not everything is perfect, but these are stories and that have been written across the continent, and today it's Ghana. Yes, there have always been concerns about a peaceful and smooth electoral process, and your reporter got that right. There's been a lot of investment in that, so much so that some people have even mocked it and called it the peace industry, because there's a whole lot of activity and programs and policies that have been drafted and drawn around the very idea that elections should be smooth and peaceful here. And maybe it speaks to the concern that of the propensity or the probability that there could be chaos. But even in advanced democracy like the United States, we've all seen the huge questions about electoral integrity in the US, issues about acceptability of results, the safety, violence being perpetrated, or concerns about safety during elections. So not completely new, but there has been investment in it out here in Ghana. We have a National Peace Council, And now that we are looking at this from a global perspective, or to put it into context, we have a National Peace Council, which is a nationally recognized governmental institutionalized body, but operates independently, kind of like the National Media Council, right? Or the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice. We have a National Peace Council as well, which is responsible for promoting, advocating, educating people, and instigating or instilling a culture of peace and civility in the country during elections or even during the 4-year period. And in the run-up to the election, I'm probably sure you followed it, there is what we call the National Peace Pact, which is one of the major events that happens before the elections. All political parties and presidential candidates meet at a national event covered by national television in front of the cameras and everybody, and they sign a peace pact that they would not perpetuate violence or encourage their supporters to do that, and they are bound by it. It's like a pledge which they are bound by, and that is one of the things that has ensured that this happens. But even the Ghanaians themselves, they've been advocacy, there've been songs, there've been different programs that have educated people on the need to be civil and civic in their attitude towards presidential and parliamentary elections, and that's probably why we see this happen. But despite that, it's a human institution. We've all heard of some of the violence or pockets of violence that have happened in previous elections, and we're just praying and hoping that we can only progress and see less and less of this as time goes on.
I must also talk about, how significant is the role of, the urban middle class. They're being described as the analytical voters. In our last conversation, we talked about, just how, the voters, not majority of all of the voters, the demography is more, tech savvy or digitalized to understand certain things, and so they can fall for deep fakes and misinformation and disinformation. But the middle class is a completely different conversation entirely. How do you see them playing? What role would they play in determining the outcome of this election?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, elections are very complicated, and as you've seen all across the world, the right-wing wave, then it turned into some left-wing wins, and then the center-right has come again. You look at elections in Italy, in Southern America, in France, we saw what happened there. In the United States, the return of the center-right is back, or even the extreme right. And all of that. We've seen the election of the first female president in Namibia, I believe, and different things are happening. And so it's important to realize that voters are not monolithic groups. And when it comes to election, there's a lot of cognitive elements and psychological elements that happen or that take place. And so you might not be able to put your hand on the rubric or on the button all of the time. But we can do some analysis and hazard some guesses and do some analysis. What I think is, yes, we are beginning to have a very more enlightened, a very discerning population out here in Ghana. I can tell you that for sure. One of the major things that you've begun to see is that, yes, we do have strongholds and then battleground states. So we have people who come into the voting either through political party affiliation, they are members of the political party, they are registered, they are affiliated, they identify with the party. So these are people who would vote for their party no matter what. And that translates into the strongholds or the safe seats, right? So Ashanti region is the stronghold of the New Patriotic Party, which is the incumbent party led by the sitting Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. And we have the Volta region, which is the stronghold of the opposition party, the National Democratic Congress, led by His Excellency, former President John Dramani Mahama, the party of Jerry Rawlings' party of Jonathan Mills in the past. Their stronghold is in the Volta region, down south in Ghana, Ashanti stronghold. But we have the swing states. We have the swing regions. I think I've been doing too much U.S. analysis. The swing regions. The swing regions as well, the Western North, we have Western, we have Central region, we have I'll take Bono, one of the Bono regions as well and then of course Greater Accra, the swingest of the swinger states, the capital, is also a swing region. It doesn't belong to any political party, and so this is where really the battle is going to be fought. But to the point, or to your question, there are even people who belong to these safe regions or strongholds who are beginning to even depart, or who don't mind departing from their political parties. And that is what brought about the concept of skirt and blouse, alone in local parlance, where you vote for a different presidential candidate for the presidency, and then when it comes to parliament, the person that you vote for does not necessarily belong to the same party as the candidate you voted for in the presidential election. So you can vote MPP in the presidency and vote NDC in the parliamentary, vote NDC in the presidency and vote MPP in the parliamentary based on the parliamentary candidates that is in your constituency. So I think there's a lot of discernment that is going on. And among the young people as well, there are many young people who are also beginning to depart from their home or their parents' party. So you find in a home, they tell you, hey, this is NPP home or this is NDC home. We believe in Dankwa, Buzia. Other persons say we believe in Rollins, in Nkrumah, and all of that. That's the older generation that there. But if you speak to a lot of young people, not all of them, but there's a beginning to be that culture of independence these days. So you can see a young person who can say, hey, yes, I come from this region. I've lived here. I've always voted for this party. But this time around, I am not going to vote for that party. I did some interviews on the ground. We've been speaking to some people qualitatively, and some people tell you that for the first time, I'm going to vote for party A or party B, or for the first time, I'm going to switch and all of that. There are people who are also voting based on issues. There are people who are voting based on issues. Your reporter mentioned illegal mining. I think I'll do a big disservice if I don't introduce that into the conversation. It's a very big issue in Ghana because people are mining for gold illegally and destroying the land, destroying the environment to the extent that water bodies have been polluted, to the extent that it is causing a degradation of the soil environment and taking away agricultural lands. And these are people who have depended on agriculture for their entire lives and their entire generations. And these lands are being destroyed, being dug up for gold, and they are not being replaced or replicated or reinstated. And so for people like this, they look at that and say, and the thing is that this is taking place in particular constituencies, which could be a stronghold for a party. But somebody can look at that and say, hey, this is how this has affected me. And so because of that, I am not going to vote for this incumbent party or this party, which is my traditional party, because this is how it has affected me. On the other hand, when it comes to something like free SHS or free secondary education, there are people who are not necessarily partisans or affiliated to the MPP or any party, but they can also tell you that, you know what, I never got to go to secondary education because of the fees. I know somebody who was sacked from school because he couldn't pay his fees in secondary education. Nobody from my village has ever attended a secondary school in a prestigious region or anywhere before. I've talked to people who said their aunties died and left children for them and they couldn't go to school. The only reason why they were able to go to school was because of free secondary education. There are people who have come from the villages to the cities, to good schools, and have gone to Cardiff, have gone to London, have gone to New York, have gone to different states to continue education right from their villages, where their mothers are selling firewood or charcoal or something. These are big stories for many people. And for voters like that, they look at it and they say, well, you know what? For me, this is what is important to me. And although I may traditionally belong to this party, on this particular issue, I think this other party has done well, I'm going to vote for them. Okay. So there's a lot of segmentation going on in this election, and we can only wait and see how that plays out finally today.
Well, actually, you took words right out of my mouth. We can see the different lines with which the different parties are actually playing on, the sentiments that they're playing on with their strategy. You mentioned something that I was going to ask about. It's kind of like two issues in this question here. First off, you talked about mining, illegal mining. I assume that you're referring to Galamsey. I think that's what it's called in Ghana. How big an issue is it that it's impacted so many policies or policies that haven't been made. That's one. On the other side is that we've had so many entries from our correspondents and people that they've spoken to about digitalization in Ghana. How big an issue is it, and why is it something that that is also an influencing factor in these elections? So two issues there regarding Galamsey, and then about digitalization, which is a difficult word to say when you're on air. But yes, those two issues.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Galamsey is definitely a big issue. If these elections were held 4 months ago, 5 months ago, 3 months ago, or a year ago from now, I mean, trust me, the government would have suffered big time because of it. And still an issue. So I mean, we'll see for the exit polls. So some of these say how many people voted based on illegal mining and Galamsey. I mean, it's huge. Some people might say it happens only in the urban, in away from Accra, but like I've explained, even in these communities, and I have to admit that most of it happens in Ashanti region, which is a stronghold of the incumbent party. And they need the numbers there because they are not too popular when it comes to the economy. Actually, they are not popular when it comes to the economy. So they do need the numbers from their home region. And illegal mining is happening. But you see, the thing about it is that it's beyond that. When the water body, everybody else suffers from it. When there's agricultural lands are being eroded and taken away, everybody suffers from it.
Actually, real quick,
so
you need to touch on digitalization because we need to round up this session. So if you can really tell us about digitalization
yeah.
now.
Okay, I was just trying to address your question, but let me go to digitalization because I think it's a two-part issue, and I've already talked about Galamsey. No, digitization or digitalization is a big issue. Listen, if we were supposed to use only one word to describe the incumbent presidential, I mean, he has made it such a central theme that you can pretty much reduce his presidential campaign to one theme or one word: digitization. The idea has been that the country needs to move to the next level, that we need to embrace digital systems to get into the fourth industrial revolution, that it's through digitization and technology and innovation that whatever Ghanaians are looking for can be brought to them in terms of making life better for them. When it comes to healthcare, you go to the hospitals and there's no more paperwork. The systems are so synchronized through digital systems. When you come to the banking system, there's mobile money interoperability, first time happened in Africa. When it comes to pharmacy, there is e-pharmacy. You can literally sit in your home and through digital systems access drugs or pharmacies. The medical drone delivery, blood is being sent to the hinterland. And Ghana has the biggest medical drone delivery system, or one of the biggest in the world. And so this is one of the major issues I believe people are going to also predicate their voting decisions on.
AJ, well, the only factor here is time, and we wait to see how it will play out at the end of the day. But thank you so much, EJ, for joining us to do this with us. EJ Sikanku, he's an associate professor with UNIMED. Thank you so much for your insights on this very crucial topic when it comes to the economy and how
it's okay if you say producer. In my former life, before I got into academia, I worked as a producer and a journalist and a political reporter.
There we go. I'm clairvoyant like that. I knew it. But thank you so much. I mean, this 2024 elections are indeed a defining moment for Ghanaians just seeking for economic, stability when it comes to the nation. But once again, we appreciate you for doing this with us. Many thanks.
Thank you very much for having me.